Yummy, yummy, yummy. I
Mm-mm-mm.
have someone very special recording with me today. Quinn Otrera from the Post Divorce Glow Up podcast. As you all know, my bestie, my coach, the one who keeps me sane.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Between you and Joe, we're going to steer this ship into harbor. Um, So yes, Quinn and I are together today. Y'all, we have we have persevered to get this episode going. We were going to record it a couple days ago and technical difficulties. I could hear her voice, but it wasn't recording. We spent like an hour troubleshooting that,
Yes, yes, we did.
only to have it not be resolved. And we were like, this
Mhm.
is me. This is how I handle things. I'm like, let's just do it Sunday. I'm sure it'll magically be better then.
And lo and behold,
It still was the same problem.
yes.
So, about 30 minutes of troubleshooting today, and we have finally, with a new app downloaded on my computer, found the solution. So, we are feeling triumphant
Mhm.
and ready. Yeah, like, I think we're more excited about this episode than we were before it because it feels like we've had to just get over each obstacle to make it come. So,
Yeah.
it's going to be really yummy, y'all. We have a really beautiful part one episode talking about kids and divorce, which y'all have been asking for this one for a long time. This is definitely one of the top three biggest reasons or concerns that you have when you're coming to me worried about, you know, what's going to happen if you get divorced or not. So it's been on the docket for a while. It feels
Yeah.
really good to finally get to record it. And to start off, we are just going to dive in. A really beautiful entry point for this first part of the discussion is straight out the gate, just discussing these potential disadvantages of divorce that are on your minds when you're considering. So, Quinn, we were talking
Mm.
about how, one of the biggest things that we hear people being afraid of, and that you and I definitely
Yes.
was this idea that we're going to ruin our children's lives by getting divorced.
Yes. And it was kind of this overarching fear. And it was through coaching with you that you helped me define what exactly do you mean by ruining your children's lives? Because I realized in that moment that for years it was just ruin. It was
Yeah.
devastation. But when we drilled down, there were some very specific fears that could be addressed. But when we speak in terms of just ruin, it will be terrible, maladjustment, or whatever it is, the big words, and our brains tend to do this to keep us
Mm-hmm.
safe and in our comfort zone. But it was only in really looking directly at what does that mean for me. And it looked different for me given who my husband is and our situation. It's different for me than it was for you, what ruining
Yeah.
their life would look like. But I was
Yeah.
definitely terrified of that.
Yeah, I love you bringing up the way our brain generalizes, just
Yes.
big overarching. You Quinn's favorite thing when she was going through it was a lot of like, my kids are going to suffer, and
Yes.
we had to like really dig down into the facts of what does that suffering
Yeah.
potentially look like. So some of the things that we came up with when we were thinking of, when we are afraid we're going to ruin our children's lives, what are we actually talking about? And we're talking about, statistics where they talk about kids potentially being at a disadvantage, which would look
Mm-hmm.
like things where they are not well adjusted afterwards, or they're struggling in school, or they're struggling with friends, maybe even like through the process of the divorce and after.
Yeah.
So, those are just a few of those pieces that I would say like tie in. Another, we had like three different sections that we kind of had under this whole ruining of children's lives. So the first one was that they'd be at a disadvantage in certain ways. The
Mm-hmm.
next one was a big fear of kids suffering, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, which
Yeah.
comes down to emotional distress, feeling angry, feeling very sad and confused, which
Yeah.
from both of our podcasts, you guys will know now, we're like, yeah, bring it on. Like this is a human
Mm-hmm. This is
reality.
life. Yeah.
Yes, but for a lot of people outside of the coaching world, the goal is to make sure your kids never hurt or never feel sad or never get
Yes.
angry. So just notice you may have a fear of your children having normal emotions
Mm-hmm.
that you may think, because of the way our culture's programmed us, are not okay.
Yes.
And then the final piece was like these adjustment challenges, which are where they've got new routines. They're now splitting time between homes. The
Mm-hmm.
normal, I'm putting in air quotes, normal, cohesive, everybody lives in the same house, everybody does the same thing has changed.
Yeah.
And with change, we often see a little bit of some rough spots. Most humans don't like change very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what were some other things on our list? I want you to bring up some of the other things, Quinn, that we had discussed being potential disadvantages of divorce.
I was very sad that I wouldn't have my kids full time, and I really wanted them as much as I could. That has changed. You know, after a little while post divorce, when it was a situation where they were with me during the week for school and then they were with their dad on the weekends, I grew to really love that. And now he's out of state and I have them full time. So it has changed. But
Mm-hmm.
at the time, at the point of considering divorce, I could not imagine a Christmas without my children or one of their birthdays without them there. The and going through the divorce, they were gone on the weekends, and trying to find ways to fill my time without my children, because they had been my life. And it
Mm-hmm.
took me some time to grow into myself, to refill myself. But at the time, I was very worried about that. And part of that was also being worried about what would happen when they were with their dad alone.
Yes.
Because he tends to have a temper and he has a different parenting style, and I would not be there to mediate the two sides. So I was afraid of what would happen, and it turned out to be justifiable fears. But
Yeah. I see this one particularly because a lot of women that have stayed, especially if there's a narcissistic or emotionally or physically abusive partner, you move into this mentality of like you're the buffer in between
yes.
their dad and the kids. And so you get really caught up in playing this role
Mm-hmm.
and are so afraid that if you're removed, they won't be safe with their dad. And we are going to, at the end, so after we go through this list, we're going to come back around and I'm going to have each of us kind of dive in a little bit more on like which ones we actually experienced.
Yeah.
Because like Quinn's hinting at, she did. This actually happened. And I love that we're going to be able to give you that perspective because we're sharing these disadvantages not to be like, and magically you will have none of them.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
It's that you get to face these and it's all doable. We can do this. We can
Yes.
do this.
Yes. And that it doesn't mean you're going to have all of them or none
Hmm.
of them. Like everybody's experience is so individual. And you'll see it from mine and Quinn's, just how different those are. And that even with very different, quote, disadvantages coming out of a divorce, you can still, I would say, with the power of coaching and managing your mind. I'm not going to say that this is an easy road to walk without knowing how to manage your mind. But
True.
through knowing how to process emotion and manage your mind, you can take, even with these disadvantages, still have it. Both Quinn and I would say we would not go back to our marriages.
No.
No, it's not
No
a
way.
thing. No.
Yeah.
So we mentioned having fear of what happens, if you're no longer there when they're going to be with their dad.
Mm-hmm.
You This is definitely one that comes up a lot, of like fear of aloneness, not, what am I going to do when I'm not with my kids, especially if you've been like a full-time parent or the primary parent. I
Yeah.
have a client right now I'm thinking of who, yeah, is just really, really emotionally, couple clients actually, who cannot imagine what it will feel like to be away from their kids. And even when they are away from their kids, there's a lot of stuff coming up.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that was big on my mind, and that also is a huge worry,
Mm-hmm.
is money. If
Yeah.
you are not the breadwinner, or even if, you do work, but you don't make the main amount of the income, that loss of that income, it can be really, really intimidating. And then that also ties into, there's just so many statistics out there that are, specifically created with the agenda of making it look good to have a two-parent household. And one of
Yeah.
those is that financially, it's very well documented that women coming out of marriage
Mm-hmm.
have less money than they did previously, which I would love your little take on statistics, because as we were talking about this, Quinn was like, you got to be careful with those. So why do you got to be careful with those, Quinn?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons. I think that so much of what well, there's that quote. There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. And we can
I have
make,
never heard that quote.
oh, really?
No.
Yeah. It's so important to dig down a little bit and to see both sides. And it does seem to indicate that women take a hit financially and men take a bigger hit socially and emotionally post divorce.
Mm.
And even if we take a hit financially, it's okay. I mean, that for me, it was survival. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine how I on earth,
You
like
were
I
going to
wasn't taking
survive.
financial benefit. Like we weren't selling a house or something for money that I could start again. It really was from rock bottom. But I've got to
Mhm.
say, I figured it the fuck out. Like
Yeah.
these are just statistics. They are not necessarily your story.
Oof. Yes, yes, yes. This is why I love the two of us together, Quinn. You guys are so lucky to have both of us on this episode, because Quinn's story is so incredible, and I'm excited to dive in a little bit after we've finished this list, to like just talk about how many disadvantages you came out with and
Mhm.
still are like, this, both of us would say this was better for us and this was better for our kids,
Oh, for sure.
even
For sure.
with the disadvantages. So one of the final ones that we had talked about was this single momming it,
Mm-hmm.
which is a fear, right? That you're gonna, especially if you have a co-parent that's gonna dip out and not be there or not show up for parenting time, that you're gonna have no breaks. You're gonna have to do it all on your own.
Yeah.
Um, that is absolutely, a fear that a lot of you have. So now that we've kind of given you a list and we've just done like a brief, and by no means is this a comprehensive list. I'm sure there's ones you all can think of that's like your specific thing, but these are the ones we could come up with. And I want to talk a little bit about our nuanced experiences with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we can even just start with this whole single momming it piece, because I remember people being like, oh my God, it's going to be so much harder to parent when
Mm-hmm.
you're not married. And once I got divorced, I realized Oh, I've been single momming it.
Yes,
Married.
yes,
Do you remember
yes.
that?
It's like getting divorced just got rid of one of the kids, the most unruly
Yeah.
child, most
It
difficult to help. And these other kids, I got this.
yeah. For me in my specific situation, especially with the Mormon conditioning, I mean, we both had it pretty rough in that
Right.
we had spouses who had also been programmed by that patriarchal religion into like work, 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 provide. And
Hmm.
my ex is an investment banker. So he was just gone all the time working.
Yeah.
And that actually ended up being a huge benefit when I got divorced because it was like, oh, here I was so afraid about doing it on my own. Actually, for me, in my specific situation, being divorced is easier raising my children than it was married
Yes.
because now I don't see them half the time. And
Um,
as I've said on this podcast very clearly, me having my children 24/7 as a stay at home mom, as Quinn will attest, is not good for my mental health.
no.
I
No.
it is not a fit for me. Where Quinn, when you said the whole you being sad about not having your kids all the time,
Hmm.
like this is an area where we differ greatly because once I got divorced and didn't have my kids half the time, I was like immediately like, sweet. What are we going to be off doing? Trying out rock climbing, trying out this and that. And I'm sure that's because, I got married so young.
You were a child, yes.
And I raised all my siblings. So this was like the first
Hmm.
time I'd had the freedom of
Yeah.
I can get to know and figure out who I am.
Yeah.
So I did not end up with the disadvantage of like the single momming it. And I still haven't. Here we are 5 years out. And actually, my ex husband has leaned in more, I would say,
Hmm. Yeah.
to co parenting and then, yeah, the not missing my kids. As amazing as they are. There's never, I think there was like
Hmm.
the very first Christmas, maybe, where I had like a moment where I had a good cry of like, I'm alone. And then the next day I met a guy off Tinder and I was like, this is fucking awesome. I'm happy. Do you remember that? It was Christmas
Yeah.
Day, Quinn. It was when I met Matt. Matt, who is now
Yes.
my best friend. We dated off and on and now he's like family to me. But yes, I cried the night before about being alone and the next day I met Matt and had the most fabulous Christmas day of all Christmas
Yes.
days prior to that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So
True.
in those areas, but an area where we both have experienced, I would say, is money for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
But for me, it got much better financially. So much
that's right.
better than when I was married. And you know, part of that is that I am earning money myself, and part of it is that there is a court order in place to where my ex can't just take all the money and spend it on his entrepreneurial
Oh my
gambles.
God,
That
yes.
money goes to his children. It gets deposited into an account. Whereas in the past, I had zero control over that. And so
Oh
now
my God.
financially, so much better, so much more stability, so much more peace than I ever had in the
Yeah,
marriage.
it was wild on your when the book comes out one day, Quinn, about the ins and outs. There are moments where Quinn will share stuff that I'm like, wait, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? What? Like
Yeah.
there are some, yeah, really, really intense things that you went through financially in your marriage. I was the opposite, right? I was married to someone who was making a lot of money, and because of that, I did have the whole you got to, you know, pay me out of this or the assets splitting. I had a good amount of money a very sizable amount of money coming out of my divorce. I was able to keep my home. He paid for it. Like crazy things coming out of my divorce that really were a huge, I'm not going to say gift because Quinn's like, yeah, you deserved that. That was payment.
You earned it. You earned every penny. Yes.
Yes,
And
I
more.
was. Yes, yes, in that marriage as a mother, all those things. But yeah,
Mhm.
very different situations coming out of our divorces financially.
Yeah, I got books. I got all the books,
I know. I
which was the
know.
most valuable thing to me. That's okay. I got the books.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you, Quinn, really, I mean, you moved to a new city. This goes
Mhm.
down into even like the single momming it piece
Mhm.
where we didn't have any family here, but that was kind of a gift because it made my ex-husband and I kind of be there for each other because we had no one else to really depend on. Plus left the religion, so we had really no
Mhm.
support group. But for you, Quinn, you moved to a different city.
Yeah. Yeah, about 45 minutes away from where my husband still has his farm. I moved to Tucson. Don't know anyone at the
Anyone?
time I moved here,
It
and
was such a fucking send, y'all. It
I am so proud of myself talking to you. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, I did that."
I
Nice.
remember I remember when I first came out and met you in person. We'd been friends
Mhm.
for a long time,
Mhm.
virtually.
Yeah.
And Quinn had me drive past the first apartment that she lived in with her kids when she moved to Tucson. And I was
Yeah.
like, I think I might have gotten emotional and been like, I am so fucking proud of you.
Yeah, it was a rough area. Lots of homelessness and, neighbors warning me to put up floodlights outside to discourage drug use. And actually, I felt very safe there. But it was
I don't remember
me.
you were not in like a panicked. This is just another great example of like the power of understanding how your brain works and not having it just run you ragged and getting regular coaching because you
Yes.
were on top of that during that period. And I remember you were like sleeping in a closet.
Yes, yes. My bedroom was my little girl's closet.
Closet. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So much like just bravery and then trusting your journey as you went along. Like
Yeah.
just
And
these
still
next
so much
steps.
better than marriage.
So crazy
It's like
that
I
that
will
is
sleep in a
true.
closet. This is so much better than my marriage. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that just, I mean, I hope for those of you that are in situations where you are like, I am so miserable. How, yeah, we get it. Quinn
Hmm.
gets it. There
Yeah.
are definitely marriages out there that are that awful that moving to an apartment where you're living in a closet is a step up.
Yeah. I just decided this was my origin story and how
Oh,
amazing this is that I get to
yes.
say, hey, I was living in a closet and now I live in this lovely home and I have this beautiful room that I could have all of my kids sleep in this room. It's
Yes.
just the contrast. It just gives me a deep appreciation and deep empathy for women. There are women who have it even rougher, who don't have their own
Yes.
apartment, that are hanging out on, relatives' couches
Or
or
move back in with family. Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So no tears for me. It's just we are so capable. We are
Mm.
so capable. And sometimes we don't know it until we have no other choice.
Yeah. Yes. And we get to like spread your wings and realize how strong you really are.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So when it comes to dropping in a little bit with fear of what would happen when they were alone with their dad, that ended
Hmm.
up not being in my instance, things actually got better for my children
Hmm.
with their
Yeah.
relationship with their dad.
Yeah,
My
he has stepped
ex-husband
up. Yeah.
really stepped up and really showed up. I feel very confident they have a better relationship with their dad now than they ever would have if we had stayed married, because when we were married he could just keep the old patterns going of always working and me just always catching, catching the
Yeah.
kids. And with that split time, he had to be a dad, and I've seen how much he has grown. Kind of like your ex having to like have to deposit the money.
Yeah.
He now had to be a dad. And for the first, 4 years of our marriage, we had no family out here. His parents have just moved out, which has been a total huge gift to have just even more support for him and the
Yes.
kids on that side, and for me just knowing they've got other adults who love them. But for a long time we did it without that, and he rose to the occasion.
Yeah.
I know your situation has been different.
Yes, my husband remarried very quickly to a woman that he had known just a couple of days, but they have managed to stay married for a few years now. I had to get a protective order within the first year. I've been to
Mm-hmm.
court with him multiple times for him not wanting to follow the parenting plan. I've had to file a police report. He's come to my door and threatened to come at me with double barrels, and he's a gun
Mm-hmm.
owner. And so I take these threats seriously. Bought bear
Mm-hmm.
spray because I don't want to actually kill him, but I do want him to stay away from my front door. And
I have bear
it's been
spray too.
different.
That's why I was chuckling. It was the same. I think we might have had this conversation where we're like, if I had a gun, would I actually shoot someone? And it was like, I don't think I would. What's the next alternative? Bear spray.
Bear
Okay.
spray.
Yep. Yep. So y'all, if you're worried about that with the X, just it's on Amazon. I think you can get a 2-pack for a good amount.
Yeah, they even have it at Costco here in
Oh
Tucson.
my
So
God, no, they
evidently it's a
don't.
thing that we need. Yeah, but ultimately I'm able to keep my kids safe. Like there is a process. So when things went down and I needed to get a protective order, I was able to do that. And within my background, within Mormonism, I didn't feel like the men were there to protect the women and children. I felt like the men were there to protect other men. And I saw that time and time again, whether it was my dad intervening on my ex's behalf or clergy. But I found that within the legal system, my attorney is a man, the judge we go to is a man, and these men have really stepped up and
Yeah.
helped me to protect myself and my children. And it has rebuilt a
Oof.
lot of confidence in the masculine that there are men who will help protect me. Not Mormon men, but
Nope.
these men
Yeah.
have really helped me. There are ways. And it's in these men standing up to my husband, who is not used to having men call him on his bullshit,
No.
it has been key in helping him understand he doesn't get to pull shit like this.
Mm-hmm.
It was really challenging for him to learn that he can't parent in the same way. He can't be violent. He can't slap. He
There are
can't hit. There
consequences.
are consequences.
And that's
Yes.
so great because that goes back to that that piece of us being so worried about ruining our children's lives.
Yes.
And that is just that piece of not being able to clearly see what is happening right now, because you in some
Right?
ways have become desensitized to the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
and and this is also that consequence that we don't think of like becoming, which we'll talk about this a little bit later. We're going to dive in a little bit with some of your stories of like you becoming complicit in your children's eyes
Yes.
because of
Enabling
the
the abuse. Yes.
yes, because of the complicated dynamics of
Mm-hmm.
being in the position where for some of you to stand up against your husband or to question him just opens up a whole nother shit show of him railing on you for a couple hours. And so maybe
Mm-hmm.
you just leave and you walk out of the room when they're being disciplined, because you know if you speak up, he's going to get upset. Or
Mm-hmm.
and what that does to your children, in a lot of the work I've done with my clients, and I've started to see how much that is a trauma in itself, of
Yes.
your other parent not stopping the abuse.
Yes. Yes.
So keeping that in mind when we're so worried about ruining our children's lives, we may be a little, if not a lot, desensitized to the level of what's actually happening right now in the
Yes.
marriage.
And one thing that was key for me to understand in going before the judge who ultimately granted this protective order was he talked about the need for my children to not only be physically safe, but to be emotionally safe. So
Wow.
while in Arizona, it is legal to hit your child as long as you don't leave a bruise, which I found out after my kids had their first vacation with dad and stepmom. And there was nothing I could do to protect them. But it finally escalated to a point where I could ask for the protective order. But the judge also pointed out that your children, if they are being regularly yelled at, if they are being regularly shamed, this is an important consideration as well. Your children
Mm-hmm.
deserve to be emotionally safe.
Yes.
And it helped me recognize that, yeah, there was some physical abuse, and not everybody deals with that. There are some men who won't cross that line, but there are men who, while they won't be physically abusive, they will be emotionally negligent or verbally abusive.
Yes.
Silent treatments can create a sense of,
Yes.
unsafety. There's lots of ways to abuse. And when we stay in those situations and they're not getting better,
Mm-hmm.
we become complicit. And I hate
Yes.
that so much, that I stayed for so long in my complicity. But I am so proud of myself for finally seeing it, finally calling it what it is, and
Mm-hmm.
having a parenting plan in place right now where my children have the opportunity to opt out of their time with their dad if they do not feel safe. They
Yeah.
just have to say the words, "I don't feel safe," and they get to opt out. And it can be emotionally, because he doesn't hit them now. But there
Mm-hmm.
are
Yeah.
still some of my teenage children who say, because of the way he parents, because of his shame-based way of trying to get us to comply,
Mm-hmm.
they don't feel safe.
I am so just so grateful that we have your experience, Quinn, because it's just, I think for a lot of women, especially in situations like yours, right? The level of abuse that Quinn had in her marriage pre getting divorced was different than mine.
Hmm.
And I don't even like really like, I don't want to use that as like a comparison of like, oh, hers was worse than mine, because whatever you're in is your worst.
Yes, yes.
But I love you being able to show this level, because I think it, and how much it has, yes, it's been a journey for you post divorce, fighting for these things and fighting to have your children be protected. But you see it every day now in them, what a
Yes.
difference it has made, now knowing they have a voice,
Hmm.
they matter.
Hmm.
And just because an adult is their parent does not mean that person gets to treat them badly.
Yes, exactly. My kids know I will fight for them. We're in a situation right
Yes.
now trying to get medical care for my son, and his father will not speak to me, and I have to have permission from his father. We still have joint decision making. And I'm having to go to court to get this
Mm-hmm.
life altering fix for my son's heart. But my son, he knows I will fight for him. I will take this
Hmm.
all the way to court. I always hope I don't have to go back to court, but my son knows I will fight for him.
Yeah,
And
and that was
my older son didn't know that because I didn't fight for my older son who was 19 or 20 when the divorce happened.
yeah.
And that has consequences.
I'm going to bring us back to that piece specifically about, this contrast between younger children, older children. I'm excited to dig into you with that. I want to kind of tie up this first piece by addressing these last few that yes, we've both seen, I would say, especially on my end, I definitely saw my kids in the beginning after the divorce. When I was going through the divorce, my oldest struggled in school. We definitely
Mhm.
had like an incident that happened at the school where he got taken to the principal's office, and that was when it came out that like, hey, we're getting divorced.
Mm.
Um,
And how old was he at this time? Because your
yeah,
kids are
so
younger than mine.
Cal would have been like 9. Everybody was so young. Now that I'm like, oh my gosh, Bo's 8 now, so he was only 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I had pretty young kids when it happened. And I would say there definitely was feelings like feeling angry, feeling sad. But because I had coaching, instead of trying to people please and manage and fix everybody with the like, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine, I just was like, yeah, this is sad. And
Yeah.
so I definitely did see my kids in the first, I would say the first year was probably the hardest. Going through the divorce was the
Mm-hmm.
hardest. First year after the hardest, and then each year after that it's just gotten progressively better.
Yeah.
And I think because my kids were so young that actually that was a huge gift on the new routines and the splitting time between homes.
Mm-hmm.
They've just kind of always grown up with that.
Yeah.
So Cal, it happened when he was 9. He was probably the one that struggled with it the most. But now when he talks to kids at school, he's like, I love it. I love that I have 2 different homes.
Yes.
I love
Yes.
that I've got, this at my dad's house, this at my mom's house. And like I said, that's a unique thing to me, right? I, the way my divorce went down, I stayed in the home that we lived in. My ex husband bought a home like 4 minutes up the road.
Mm-hmm.
So we live really close. In my custody agreement, he does almost all of the driving. My attorney knew what she was
Mm-hmm.
doing, and so he's always picking them up from here, and they when they get dropped off the bus, and
Mm-hmm.
so that really worked out really well for me. How do you feel it was for your children as far as like the struggling in school, the emotional distress, specifically with the divorce?
Yeah, the divorce was happening in fall of 2020. So this was COVID. And we had planned to move the kids to Tucson for school. And it just happened to coincide at the same time as the divorce, COVID, new schools. And some of the school was online. It was a rough year, independent of divorce, as far as school went, at least here in Arizona. I think it was my 9-year-old as well that struggled the most. I had to switch schools for her. She wasn't up for the more aggressive academics of the school I had initially put her in and had to switch her. Luckily, it was okay because everything just kind of felt wonky that
Mm.
year with the masking. You could only go to school on certain days. It was just all so weird that the divorce just ended up being part of the
Part of
weird.
yes,
Yeah, so it's hard to just say, oh, the divorce really impacted this because there were a lot of other factors in
factors.
there. It was the
Yeah.
next year when I had managed to purchase a home, moved to a neighborhood, and decided I was pulling them out of these charter schools that we had moved to Tucson to attend. And I said, we're just going to be in this place and we're going to go to the neighborhood school. And
Yes.
that's when more of the challenges came up because my kids were now, they didn't live in a small town that, we had initially moved to a really tiny town with a really tiny school when we first moved to Arizona. They were living in a neighborhood for the first time, going to school with kids from the neighborhood for the first time, trying to make friends in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when, again, that oldest of my youngest children, so she would have been probably 10 at this time, 9 or 10. And she would write me notes begging me to homeschool her. Please don't make me go to school.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any friends. And she was the oldest in the elementary school and felt like everybody already had their friends. It was a rough year.
I
It was
remember
rough,
that.
but I knew that she would get through it, and just pouring some extra support her way. The others didn't seem to have the
The
same
same
challenges.
struggles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
But she,
that one
and I
did.
was going to say, she's the one that just this year, right, has kind of,
Mhm.
it's kind of clicked and she's found her crew.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, you grow into it. It doesn't,
I
I mean, if
know.
they're struggling now at 9 or 10, it doesn't mean they will always struggle. But now she has so
Mm.
much empathy. She's the girl that will try to include people. And she will come to me for support when she is feeling lonely or she wants to invite friends over because I know her journey. And we grew in trust
Yes.
in me showing up for her in the ways that I could. I couldn't homeschool her.
No, as Quinn's coach at the time, with everything Quinn was navigating with her own, starting a business, and I was like, we cannot sink this ship to try and save, or
Yeah.
save's not the right word, but eliminate the suffering
Yeah.
of
And I would have
her.
had to get my husband's permission to homeschool. And there was no way in hell he was going to do that. So it
No.
was just a non-starter. But
Yeah.
I mean, that was a time where it felt really shitty for me because
Yeah.
even if I wanted to, I would still have to get permission from someone that wasn't going to give me permission. I don't think the courts would have given me permission. There was no reason other than my daughter was unhappy. So if he and I didn't agree, it wasn't going to happen. So there are some areas where you can fight for your children and you can protect them. And there are other times where it's just like, just pouring so much empathy and like, I'm sorry you have to go through this and I'm going to be here to support you through it.
Yes, which is like what we want for our kids most is this
Mm-hmm.
understanding that you're going to go through hard things and I'm here to support you. I'm not going to come in and rescue you or save you because it's just not a long term. That's the
Yeah.
um a little bit of the important mentality to have when we're thinking of like, yes, is this going to be quote harder on our kids?
Mm-hmm.
They are going to be in two different homes. They're going to be navigating things they wouldn't if you stayed married. In some ways, it is going to be harder. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that is just because it's harder in some ways doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah. And we want that long term. We want them to know you're going to go through hard things in your life and I'm here to support you. And I have so much
Yes.
empathy and you can do this. That's what we
Yes.
want long term for our kids.
Versus just rescuing and making everything better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm so glad we got to dive into all of these. It's kind of like our starting point. And what we want you most in listening to this, like kind of as you're reflecting after this episode, is realizing that, yes, if you do decide to get divorced, some of these may absolutely be your reality. And as
Mm-hmm.
you saw, there are like areas in each of these where it does coincide with both yours or mine or our realities. But this was a point Quinn made when we were discussing this outline that I really loved, where you said it's not a one-to-one reality, which is what so much of the fear mongering pre-divorce is about, especially if you have a spouse who keeps saying like, you're ruining the family, you're going to ruin the kids.
Mm-hmm.
They really harp on that, like, this is guaranteed.
Yes.
And it's just not. It's so much more nuanced. There are so
Mm-hmm.
many different angles. You even saw us doing it. I noticed. I was like, well, basically, we gave you all the disadvantages and then magically turned them into like how we worked through them, and they were great.
Yes,
But
yes.
that's what our coach brains do. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
technique that we used while going through it, of like, okay, I can resist what is and hate this and make it worse by resisting it, or
Mm-hmm.
I can lean in, drop down, feel all the fucking feelings that are going to be a part of this,
Yeah.
and keep
Yeah.
trusting my inner truth, which told me this is the next right step.
Yes, yes. It's such
Mm-hmm.
an important thing to understand that it's not an if then statement. That's just not reality. If I get
Mm-mm.
divorced, it's necessarily worse, or if I get divorced, it's necessarily better. So
Mm-hmm.
much of it has to do with the skills that you have, the skills that you build. And that's where
Yes.
the coaching comes into place, because everything has to be filtered through this human brain. And the human brain is generally pretty negative and just wants to keep us safe. And so
Yes.
it would rather be in a marriage that is just shitty but known, rather than taking a step into the unknown. Your brain really wants you to not do that. But there
Yeah.
is this part of you, if you know that this is the path for you, that, just bridling the brain to go, okay, yeah,
Mm.
some women suffer in this way. Some women excel in this way. I wonder what my path is going to be. Just coming at it with some curiosity and allowing. I love that you said non resistance, because as I would drive my kids to school back in 2020 in a city where I knew no one of my biggest fears was, what if I get a flat tire? What if something happens?
I
What if I'm in
remember
an
this.
accident? I have no one to call. And I would drive to school with this intense anxiety just all the fucking time. And then just
Mm.
allowing it to be there and to bubble and to steam and just be like, oh, but I got me. I got me. Plus, there's AAA. I got
I
me.
know we
I
did.
got me.
I remember that coaching session where we were like, "Oh, isn't there a service? Like, I think there's that service."
Yeah, that can be solved. That can be solved.
This could
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that can be solved in different ways, but ultimately that is the most beautiful example of like, and then there are some things that just can't, and it's just for you to
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
through it. And God, that is what makes Quinn and I such the powerhouses that you hear, is that work
Yeah.
of staying with ourselves through really scary, intensely sensational moments of this
Hmm.
journey, and not abandoning ourselves. That's the retraining of that childhood trauma
Yeah. Yeah.
that is like, ooh, the deeper, deeper work.
I know. There was this part of my brain that thought it would be a good idea to stay with my husband so I had someone to call if I got a flat tire. So insane.
It is so accurate, though. It
Oh.
is so accurate. I have so many women that exactly are like, what am I going to do? I don't know how to pay any of the bills. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't either. What
Hmm.
happens if I get a leak? Yeah, I didn't know that. Like, so many skills that, like you just
Yeah.
said, you learn, you acquire, you, especially for some of you that have just been really, quote, taken care of in these ways where you're like, I don't know how to do these things. If there's skills you can learn,
Yeah.
that's something that you can either hire someone or figure out yourself. YouTube.
Yes. YouTube. YouTube.
YouTube
And
is fueling so many women's, smooth divorce trajectories. Like,
yes, and the
Google,
incredible sense of pride as you
for
slough
real.
off the infantilization that that was my past to learn how to
Mm-hmm.
do certain things that I've never done before. Just that sense of pride, like, oh, and my children
Yes.
get to see this. My six
I
daughters
know.
get to see this, and my sons. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
we can intentionally grow up, intentionally learn how to care for ourselves, our
Oh,
surroundings, our children. It's such an important growth process. You don't want to miss it.
yes. Oh my God, Quinn. I hope you guys can hear my snapping. I'm just dying. Okay, I want to take us into, especially as we were talking. I'm not even going to remember what I was going to tie it into. So I'm just going to go straight into our next section, which I am
Okay.
obsessed with. And I have definitely, Quinn's been coaching me a lot on this, and it's been helping tremendously.
Mm.
So I want you to share this quote that you read
Okay.
that talks about these different standards for mothers versus fathers.
Okay, so this is from the book For Better or for Worse: Surprising Results from the Most Comprehensive Study of Divorce in America. Such an important book that will give you
Mm-hmm.
facts about divorce. And they break it down to what's happening right after divorce, 2 years, 6 years, 10 years, 20 years for all parties involved. And so this is about the men. The 14% of men in our study who had custody of their children also felt overwhelmed by family demands. But custodial fathers often had buffers unavailable to custodial mothers, including money to hire domestic help, and probably even more important, a more forgiving view of the parental role. In households headed by the father, youngsters were more likely to be required to keep their room tidy, to help out with dinner dishes and cooking or yard work because men were less vulnerable to paroxysms of guilt if they didn't do it all themselves.
Yeah. So this research is, I think, key. Key when you are moving into a space where you are going to be single parenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're not going to have a second person around because you can move into that space thinking you still need to do it all.
Yes. If I was a stay at home mom and I drove my kids to school and I packed all their lunches and we did fun things on the weekends, like I still have to be that mom.
Yes. And we definitely have seen this for me of I was a stay-at-home mom without a business.
Mm-hmm.
And then went after divorce, started my own business, and I've actually only in hindsight, really looking at the last 5 years, have I realized how much I have been trying to do it all.
Yes.
And definitely experienced guilt heavily in my mothering role. And
Mm-hmm.
so recently, Quinn coached me. It was such a phenomenal session where, as we're coaching, and I am just, rah, 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 about what a bad mom I am and how, and she was like, wait a second. If you were a dad, how would you be feeling right now about your parenting? And I was like, oh, I would be crushing it.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
like,
yes.
and I saw for the first time this dichotomy of the standard I hold fathers to versus the standard I hold mothers to.
Mm-hmm.
And really pausing to go, is it serving me to continue holding myself to this a standard I hadn't, I needed to re-question, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do I really need to be doing for my children?
Yeah.
And what we've seen is it's been phenomenal for me moving into this idea of like, I'm the dad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, I'm the dad because then when I'm working or I'm doing stuff like the other day, my boys, I have, with the community launching, there's a lot of work that I've been doing. They've been on fall break. So I was working in my office having a grand old time. Like, I love work. It is my creative
Mm-hmm.
genius. It is my flavor. And meanwhile, they're all in the living room happy as larks playing Minecraft together, right? And that was how we spent the whole day.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, we went out to dinner, Joe, me, and the boys, and Joe kind of leaned over to be like, "How are you doing, baby?" Because there was some like emotional stuff going on with my 14-year-old and some
Mm-hmm.
frustration around some rules that have been set with his phone lately. And I turned to him and said just basically the same thing. I was like, was if I thought of myself as a mom right now, I'd feel pretty shitty, but I'm a dad, and so I'm fucking crushing it. And I have loved just calling out these double standards for myself
Yeah.
and getting a little bit more clear on that. I think mothers' jobs are to like make sure everybody's happy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I step into more of like a I'm the dad headspace,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as, codependent, trying to make sure that everybody's always happy and on the same page. I'm able to be very loving and also very like, I don't know if the word's firm. What would you say, Quinn? It's just a little.
There is a little bit of a just more of a reality check, I think, because
Yes.
if we said they were at their dad's house and played Minecraft all day, and then he took them out to dinner, but he had work to do all day, I don't think anyone would blink at that. But when you
No.
say a mother was in her office playing on the computer all day and her kids were ignored, weren't fed, they weren't
Mm-hmm.
snuggled, they, whatever. And so she had to bring them out for dinner because she wasn't willing to make them a home cooked meal. I mean, the internalized misogyny of it all. This is the
Yes.
standard for dads, and you're like, oh, way to go, dad, way to provide. And then you brought him out to dinner, and that's so great. And for the mom, it's like, where's the home cooked meal? They should have 3 meals a day. And, just the stories we tell
Yes.
ourselves. And I used to blame it on Mormonism, but I think it's wider spread than that.
I agree.
It's a thick flavor in Mormonism, but it's throughout our society.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially being very aware of this because I do think it gets increased once you get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
Your unknown operating systems that may be making it even harder on yourself than it has to be
Yes. Yes.
by still holding you to standards like last night, for example. Good moment. And I'm having to really learn this. We're ordering and my middle son goes to I thought he was going to get a burger, and then like mid order with the waiter he decides he wants to get a steak and potatoes. We're going from
Mhm.
like a $16 burger to like a $45 plate. And I just kind of stopped him to be like, whoa, hold up a second, dude. And my boys, mainly because, I have done a lot of just because of the money I came out of my divorce with and just really kind of tried to keep the same standard. And it's only been in
Mhm.
the last year that I've been like, look, I need to be realistic about like what this is. And so I had a beautiful conversation with them last night. For me, not for them. They did
Mhm.
not like this conversation where I just brought the like reality, the truth to the forefront of, hey, when you're out with me, I am not an investment banker. I am not making 300K plus a year. This is, I understand that with your dad, you can order whatever you want and he will buy you whatever you want. But with me, that's not the case. And having to work through my own feelings of like, it's okay
Yeah.
that I can't give them what their dad can give them financially,
Yeah.
and learning to be more comfortable communicating that with them because
Mhm.
I've like as I've stopped and been like that's what I want them to understand.
Yeah.
There are people out there that do have to actually look at the cost of things on a menu before they order.
Mhm. Yes. And it's such a gift, that contrast between dad and mom, between value
Mm-hmm.
systems, between, expenditures, whatever. It's that
Yeah.
beautiful contrast that they get both.
Yeah, absolutely. And seeing that and not seeing it as, oh, it's somehow worse. That
Hmm.
this is right. This is where we start to really move into the more nuanced, like, yes, they may get more things at his house and at my house. There's, in some ways, a different style of connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do want to mention this idea because I had one client who very typical mother kind of energy, kind of worrying about her kids, trying to do everything for her kids, all the laundry, all the cooking, all of the transportation, just and working full time.
Yep.
And I shared this idea of, how can we change your standard? Can you be the dad? And she's like, well, somebody's got to be the mom. And what she meant by that is if
Oh.
I'm not worried about this, if I'm not busy micromanaging everybody to make sure everybody gets everything that they need all the time, something bad is going to happen.
Mm,
And the truth is, something good is going to happen if you can stop
yeah.
worrying all the time, if you can teach your children to do their own laundry, if they can help with cooking and gaining skills, something good will happen. So if we can bring to our consciousness, what do we mean by being a good mother? And really looking at it and
Yes.
seeing if that actually serves our children or if it just serves our ego.
Yes, because as she said, the whole, if I don't do this, something bad's gonna happen. The
Hmm.
the thing that hit my brain was like childhood trauma. That is a
Mm,
childhood trauma response
yeah.
of growing up in a place where you did not feel safe, and so your only mechanism was to control. If I can just control myself and my environment enough, maybe I can prevent my parents from neglecting me or hurting me or lashing out.
Yeah.
So just realize, when we want to make it perfect for everybody and keep everybody really happy, that is a like pendulum swing. It's another form of traumatizing your
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
And so really slowing down and owning our own trauma and recognizing when our behaviors with our children are truly, like you said, something that's actually good parenting for them, or if it may just be a pattern that we, an adaptive pattern we had in childhood of,
Yes.
I've got to manage everybody or something bad's going to happen.
Yes. Yes.
So this also ties into another, section, kind of different angle we wanted to talk about, which I loved with you saying, like, we need to decide for ourselves what a good mother is. And why that's so important is because whether you get divorced or not, ultimately you are not in charge of how your children are going to interpret their childhoods.
Yeah.
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 They may
Um,
think it's the best that you got divorced. They may think it's the worst. So you
mhm.
don't get to choose.
And you don't get to choose. And if you stay married, they may think that was the best, and they may think that was the worst.
Yeah.
So this goes back to that so many of us have, right? These patterns of wanting to like control everybody. If I don't worry
Mhm.
about them, who will? And thinking that somehow worrying about them is going to get you the result of them feeling happy about you as a mother, or thinking that you did a good job.
Mhm.
We know this is not the case, though.
No, it is not.
Yeah.
And I have the experience of having two of my children were out of the home at the time of the divorce. One had passed away, of my nine children, and then I had six at home when the divorce was happening.
Mhm.
And the and my oldest son, so is this a good time to just jump into that?
Yes, that would be perfect. Because Quinn has an actual, I think this is once again the beauty of your story, such a beautiful contrast of how various, your children have had different experiences with this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my younger ones have such a different mom. when my older ones get
Oh
together
my
and
gosh.
talk about, their childhood, every story ends with, and then mom got mad. I'm like,
It
can we
is
come
such
up
a
with a
thing.
different
Your kids
ending?
love it.
They do. It's just this joke now. Oh, and then mom got mad. But I'm glad it's a joke instead of a reality. But my oldest son, he was
Yeah.
20, 19, going on 20 over the course of the year, where I got divorced. I had left Mormonism. That was very challenging for him at the time. He ended up leaving Mormonism as well. So there was a lot of upheaval. And we stayed in contact for several years. But in this past year, he has asked for no contact. It's been over a year now, probably a year and a half or 2 years. And in large part because I stayed married. When he was being used for child labor on our farm,
Yes.
homeschooled, isolated, this very strict form of Mormonism and worship and way of being and shaming. And when I talk about the physical abuse of my ex, I'm not talking about him like beating the children. It would be like in moments where he would like twist their ear, or sometimes he would be rough with them or get like scream at them, that kind of thing. That was still very, very frightening to the nervous system of a child. And
Yes.
me not intervening, me not insisting that they be put into school, that they not be used for labor, it has cost me my relationship with my oldest son.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had to mourn that loss and to really
Mm-hmm.
be introspective about what I did, owning my part of that. And maybe at some point he'll be in a place where he wants to reconnect, but I have to accept that that may never happen. And in large part, it's because
Mm.
I stayed married to his father. And
Yeah.
I can't help but think if I had left his father, one of the first times that I thought I should leave this man, which was when I was pregnant with this older son, if maybe I would have him in my life. And
Mm.
it's just a price to be paid. Like, and I support my son in his healing journey. If he doesn't feel safe around me, I don't want him to try to be around me in order to make me feel better.
Oof.
And it's something that I get to live with. So staying married and thinking, oh, I'm preventing suffering by staying married. Oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, it is such a lie. It blinded me to the suffering of my children at the time. Just a couple
Yeah.
days ago, I was sitting with one of my daughters and she's writing an essay for a scholarship. And she was talking about this time where we were in my sister's basement. We had a stack of 7 mattresses that we would pull out and put across the living room floor because that's where we would sleep together every night. And she referred to it as the time of us being homeless. And I
Mm.
didn't define it that way in my mind, but I can see how she would define it that way. And me just aching and apologizing and crying in that moment as I read her essay. And then telling her, "You're welcome for all of these topics you get to write. Essays for scholarships. I hope you win this scholarship." But there was so much that happened that I didn't see or I was unwilling to see because the marriage, keeping the marriage together was so important. It was more important
So
than my
important.
children. It was more important than me. Like the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so rotten. It was so, so rotten that it
Mm-hmm.
really didn't take much to destroy it once I started being honest.
Ooh, Quinn, thank you so much for letting us dive really deep into, once again, just some of the potential realities that are a part of getting divorced. There are
Mm-hmm.
costs. Um, and I know you have seen, right? I feel like you got out when you did, and that has dramatically changed the lives of all of your younger children. Like you
Yes.
said, they are growing up in a completely different house.
Yes.
And, there were older kids that didn't get to have that experience. And I really loved in our outlining session when we were discussing this episode, you said a line that I just thought was so powerful, especially coming from you. And you just said, if you enable abuse, your child has every right to cut you off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is a hard one statement. Like, as someone who understands, like, just to share with y'all on the podcast, this is not something that Quinn just like automatically showed up when this first, began with her son, of him being like, I don't want any contact, and her just being like, yeah, he gets to have that. Like, there was so much processing and grieving and coaching that you
Yeah.
did to I loved that moment where you were like, I want to support him and him having what he needs to heal. And that right now, and perhaps the rest of his life, is space from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And doing the deeper personal work to be able to move into a space where, like you said, you don't need him to stay in contact with you just to make you not feel bad about the
Yeah.
choices you made that led to this.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are times where I will argue with him in my head, like, you don't know me. Come get to know me now. And his birthday's coming
Yeah.
up and I don't know him. And that is really sad to me, but at the same time, I had years with him and I'm so grateful for those years with him. I adore
Mm.
this boy. He's so funny, so smart. But looking back at the contrast when I was first coaching with you and saying, I can't leave because of my children, and then being here now and feeling so sad for these kids who didn't get to experience their mother as a divorced woman. I
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I was doing the best thing for them, and the best thing that I believe now is that I got divorced. I have this beautiful home, and I'm not talking physically beautiful. I'm talking this home that is shameless.
Energetic.
Yes, this
Yes.
space. My kids don't have their own rooms. They don't each have their own cars. Not that they would have had those if I had stayed married, but it's not about the stuff. It's about, do my children feel safe and loved in this home? They absolutely do. They can tell me anything.
Yes.
They can say all the words. We can have deep discussions. They're free to be angry, upset. People don't have to be
Mm-hmm.
always happy. It's a beautiful, beautiful home, and I am sorry I did not give that to my older children.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
don't think it would have been possible to give it to them being married to their dad.
No, and
No.
as we've said on the podcast before, this is just the timing of one's
Hmm.
journey. This is trusting that your oldest son also, like, this is his journey.
Yeah.
And although we may feel like something went wrong, that he didn't have a different childhood, I think of your own origin story,
Yeah.
as your daughter in her essay is talking about these rough things she went through.
Hmm.
Um, it's holding both, right? It's holding the compassion that we have for what she went through, and also understanding it made her who she is.
Yeah. Yeah. I have no
And
idea what my son's journey needs to be, but it gets to
mm-mm.
be his, as with all of my children. Now, I'm saying I have this beautiful home. Maybe one of my kids in my home right now will grow up and say, you should have stayed married to our dad. That was the worst thing. I hated your home. And they get to say
Yes,
that. They get to believe
exactly.
that. It's not up to me.
Yeah, and this is going to tie in. So, in I'm thinking, as you were talking about that, like, my children's experiences and what they would
Hmm.
be thinking. And we don't have as extreme, right,
Mm-hmm.
of the abuse that was happening. But I do strongly, like I know for certain that in my marriage, we had codependent, narcissistic ways of relating. And
Yeah.
definitely in marriage, that they were picking up on, that they were
Yes.
seeing, that they were getting as a blueprint of what it's going to be like going, what marriage is. So I want to tie in. We had talked about this piece of realizing a lot of bad results for kids get pinned on divorce
Mm-hmm.
when, as you are going to share in one of the quotes, right,
Yeah.
that actually a lot of the fucked up things that we say come from a divorce were actually already there
Yeah.
in the marriage.
Yeah.
So
So
tell me
it's
more.
okay. So it's in the same book, For Better or For Worse, Divorce Reconsidered. And at the very end, they give lessons that surprise them over the course of this 20-year study. And this was lesson 5: the past is present. Many of the difficulties that are blamed on divorce, such as depression, antisocial behavior, poor interpersonal relationships, and lack of problem solving skills in parents, inept parenting, and emotional and behavior problems in children, are often present in dysfunctional families long before the divorce occurs.
Like, what? How did we not all see this earlier?
Right?
This is so obvious. Once you say it, it's like, duh. Of course, there are issues that are already present,
Mm-hmm.
that it is not, the divorce caused necessary. We can't
Mm-hmm.
pin all of it on divorce. That's the point. And boy, have I seen that, especially in my, I would say in my parenting recently. You've watched me go through, we've gone through some tough things recently with my 14-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
testing boundaries. And I remember on one of the worst nights of it, just really feeling super discouraged and definitely watching my brain go back to like, oh my God, if I wouldn't have gotten divorced, maybe he wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And having Joe so beautifully be like, no, baby, this is, you can't equate that, like, oh, this wouldn't have happened if I would have stayed married. And
Yeah.
realizing in that moment when I did, I think you coached me the next day, and us seeing how we as mothers, we are just so, our brains are so tricky about thinking, I do this, my kid does this, I do this, my
Mm-hmm.
kid does this, like it's a direct correlation. I think it's way less correlated
Yes.
than we think it is. And so, or caused, right, causation rather than correlation.
Yes.
I do this, it causes my kid to do this. And the next day we're talking, and you, I think, made the point where you were like, yeah, let's say this was always going to happen. And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, I'm so grateful I am not married.
Right?
Because, yes, we got to go through this shitstorm with my 14-year-old. And instead of climbing in bed that night with, if I'd been married, my ex husband, who we did not communicate well, I did not feel emotionally seen and understood. I
Mm-hmm.
found myself climbing in bed with Joe, who, cuddled me right in. I bawled into his chest. He didn't try to
Yeah.
fix me. And then when we had this just beautiful process of him supporting me, and he has throughout the whole thing in these ways that instead of tearing down me or questioning my parenting, or there was a lot of that in my previous marriage. I just felt so stressed
Mm.
around my parenting because we just were
Yeah.
not on the same page with that. And it was, to go through that and be able to have a partner that I trusted and could be supported by. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, if it's going to be this way either way,
Mm-hmm.
I will choose, at least here I get to be supported and have a partner who can be there for me in the ways I need.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree.
Yeah, so it's just, I think it's a lot of realizing it can be a shit show growing up.
Yes, it's just a human thing. It's not necessarily my parents were divorced or my parents stayed married. Growing up,
Exactly.
it's tough being a human. It just is.
Yes. And acknowledging that there's trauma way before, you know what I mean? Like, this is
Hmm.
me acknowledging, oh, yeah, Cal is getting raised by a mama who has CPTSD,
Yeah.
father who molested her, mother who was narcissistic, raised in a cult. Like, we're dealing with a lot here that's just
Yeah.
because I'm his mom and all the stuff he has on his dad's side. So, whether we got divorced or not, there's already a
Hmm.
large amount of pieces and variables.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, for myself, I'm like, oh, the divorce has just made that better. In
Yeah.
my take, it has definitely helped me to be a better parent. I can't even imagine what kind of a parent I'd be right now if I was still married,
Oh,
because as you know, where I was at 5 years ago,
yeah.
I was just a shell. I can't
Yeah.
imagine going through what I went through with my 14-year-old this summer, the shell that I was 5 years ago. It would have annihilated me. It
Yeah.
was very tough for who I am even now, and I
Hmm.
have built a huge reservoir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we talk about building that reservoir, I think that sometimes we as mothers assume that if we take time for ourselves, if we do something that is really necessary for our own health and safety, like getting divorced, that it necessarily means our children suffer. It necessarily means these certain things like we've talked about. But what I have found time and time again is that the more I show up for myself, the better I take care of myself, the more I just give myself the space to say, okay, kids, you're on the screens. Mama's going to take care of herself in
Mm-hmm.
all the beautiful ways, physically, spiritually, emotionally, socially, as I fill up my reservoir. And I like the idea of a reservoir rather than fill your own cup. I love the image of like something deep
Yeah.
that is
Mm,
being
mm,
fed.
mm,
And
mm.
so I have this reservoir that my children can dip into. Now, not all the time. There are times I get to the end of my day and I'm like, I don't have enough for you to come
It's
snuggle
bedtime.
with me. Like, go to bed.
Yes. Which is going back to that, like, allowing yourself to be a dad and trusting
Yes.
that just because you're not always a yes doesn't mean they are not still loved.
Yes. I love you and go to bed. Yes.
Yes.
And there are a lot of times I go to bed, my kids are still up. I'm like, don't stay up too late. And I go to bed because I know if I take care of me, that's the best thing I can do for my kids in all the
Yes.
ways. I can't think of a single way that showing up for me does not make me better for my kids.
This is such a radical thing to say that I like, and I feel it in every fiber of my being as well. And I'm at hearing you say it, I'm like, oh my God, we have done the work to change that belief from where it was
Mm-hmm.
and the culture we were raised in, which was so much martyrdom. Women,
Mm-hmm.
were put on pedestals. I remember listening to Mother's Day. I couldn't handle towards the end Mother's Day. Oh my God.
Ugh.
Talks where people would just venerate these women who did nothing. She does nothing for herself. She takes care of everybody else. She's so
Mm-hmm.
giving. And me just being like, I am sick and tired of men standing up talking about how grateful they are that this woman has completely annihilated any vestige of herself so that everybody
Yes.
else can have things be easier. And
Yes.
I love that you and I can so powerfully say, from like hard earned trial and, learning,
Mm-hmm.
no, it is a huge lie that the less of you there is because you've poured into everybody else, the better everybody will be.
Mm-hmm.
The more of me there has been, both you and I have seen, the more our children, it's like they energetically see, like, my
Hmm.
mom gets to be a human. I get to be a human too.
Yes, yes, it is such a gift to our children. And you have these three boys, and they're going to see women as humans
Oh
instead
yeah, they're gonna
of,
see them as spicy, like woof.
yes.
Like Joe, it was so funny. Yes, the other day we were leaving like a football game of Cal's, and Cal said something like, Joe, this is the one you picked," because I was being like spicy with him or something, and I loved it. I loved it because I love that they are seeing someone who they really admire. I like they love
Mhm.
Joe. They see how
Yeah.
calm and that he just adores and loves this spicy, wild little spitfire of a human.
Hmm.
I want that for them versus what I was raised with of like women who sit in the background and
Yes.
what can I do for you? Lately, my littlest has been like, can you get me a glass of water? I'm like, no, you can do that yourself. Like,
Yep. Yep.
bringing on the strong dad vibes
Yep.
lately.
Get your own water.
You're 8 now. I think you can do it.
You can do it. You can do it.
You can do it.
Yes.
Oh my God. So I want to finish out one of the things we talked about ending this episode with. It's been so beautiful with you, Quinn. I knew it was going to be. God, I just love our conversations. At the beginning of this episode, we talked about the disadvantages that a lot of you may be worried about. But one of the things we mentioned is just how much like nobody talks about the benefits of divorce for your kids.
Oh,
Like
yes.
that is not a phrase or a word that gets thrown around. Like it feels like this little tiny manuscript like tucked away in a
Yes.
old library that
Yes.
like nobody gets to look at.
Yeah, you don't see the headlines, front page news, 10 reasons why you should get divorced today. You but no, if there's an uptick in divorce rates, it's like divorce is on the rise, men are lonely, that kind of thing. But with social media, women are talking about this, and it's so important
Yes.
to talk about it.
Yes. So we wanted to just close the episode out by sharing a few of the benefits that we have seen now, having gone through divorce, getting to actually see boots on the ground, what it's been like for our kids. Um, I'll just start us off. One of the things we've noticed is having this contrast of two
Hmm.
different homes.
Yeah.
And contrary to everybody's fears of like, oh, that's going to be so difficult, both of us have seen the benefit in getting to see their, and I'd say this is probably more for you. For me, I've loved, we
Yeah.
talked about this like energetic difference in the different homes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I loved what you said specifically of, especially in your children's instance, where they were coming from a marriage where you were complicit by
Hmm.
staying with him in normalizing the abuse without you even realizing it.
Hmm.
In you guys being separated, they've now been able to see their dad in a more clear-eyed way.
Yes, because I'm not there to filter everything. It used to be my children would come to me about something about their dad. I would go to their dad, try to explain it to, I was like this translator, explain it to him in a way he could understand and like try to mediate some kind of
Yes.
connection. And I did that so much, especially with my oldest
So
son.
much.
And so to now be like, I am out of the way. That gets to be your dad. And I love that because it shows them the different ways of being in the world and not to make their dad always wrong or me always right. They'll come to me and say, Dad said this, or Dad's going to vote for this person. Dad. And I just get to say, yeah, that's your dad. Just from a very neutral place that
Mm-hmm.
this is just what is. And they're going to come across people all the time where they're seeing that contrast is normal between
And that
different
they
places.
that they get to have opinions.
Yes.
You don't have to like everybody. You don't have to love everybody. You don't even have to love someone who is your parent.
Right?
And that is, you guys, you don't understand how important that is if you are in a abusive relationship with your parent.
Yeah.
Because what gets so fucked up in traumatic childhoods is you are being abused and you are having normal feelings of like, this is wrong. This isn't fair. Why do they get to do this to me? And it gets squashed and shoved down by either the parent doing it to you or the parent who's complicit in it with like, well, we're the adults, or projecting it back on you as like, you're the problem.
Yeah.
So when you have that contrast, and I think it's often, so much of it, I would say the majority, is even just done on like an energetic unconscious level for your children, of just like, here's how it feels here, here's how it feels here, this is how this parent communicates with me, this is how this one does.
Yeah.
I just can't even on how important that is for their sense of self
Yes.
learning. Like, I don't have to allow people to, I can know that people are abusing me and I can choose to understand that. And then just, it's, I would say in your instance, the power of having a parent who can actually advocate and protect you. Right?
Yes.
With my kids, I would say it's a little more nuanced. It's not as clear, right? I think my kids go back and forth on different moments of being like, man, mom's the best. And also like, or moments when they're like, I can't wait to go to dad's house. That is like my 14-year-old's like favorite thing to say right now. Whenever he gets mad, it's like, I can't wait to go to dad's house. And just letting that be his experience and being like, yeah, I get it. That's okay. You want to go to your dad's house right now. I mean, of course he does.
Yeah.
Because in the moment that mom's saying, yeah, in the moment that mom's saying no, of course he wants to go somewhere else. But that's just like part of, I see it now as, instead of this like, oh, it's so bad that they have these two different things and it's not all cohesive. I'm like, no, in instances where you have trauma or abusive things happening just from the genetic shit that's been sliding down the mountain for so long, we actually do want this contrast.
Yes. And I love that they love both homes. Like, there's neither one of the homes between you, your husband, and your in-laws that they're like, I don't feel safe in this place. Your kids have 3 places that they can go and they will be safe. Such a gift. It's not
and three places with like very different views and ideas about the world.
Yes. Yes, that too.
Which is beautiful because they're you know, as I explained to them, like, what's your opinion? You get to have an opinion. You get to decide what you want to think about all the different things.
Yeah.
So that is one of the really beautiful things with the contrast. Another thing we had talked about was, and this is just tying into that, right? You said a safe space now where they can be unapologetically themselves and there's room for their shadows.
Yes. My kids get to be upset. They get to be sad. There's nothing that they can say that's going to cost them their relationship with me. They can wear what they want to wear. I may have an opinion.
Yes.
But it's not going to be shamey. It's more like, wow, we're shaving our arms now, are we? Like, okay, tell me about this. It's something that I guess girls in 6th grade in Tucson are doing. But it is safe for them.
Yeah.
But they know
to explore.
Yes. But in their dad's house, they need to show up a certain way and they need to dress a certain way. They have to pack certain things in order to feel safe there. And again, I mean, it sounds like that's bad, but I mean, throughout their life, they're going to have to adjust to, when I go to these places, this is the way the social norms are. And when we're here, this is the way the social norms are. And so I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing, though God, I'm glad they're home with me most of the time.
Yeah, I see it as I see the benefit there is that instead of if you'd stayed married, them being where they have to dress a certain way, they have to talk a
Hmm.
certain way, they have to love a certain gender,
Yeah.
all of those roles, and that being their only world, right?
Yeah.
This is the one way the world is. They now have a second data point, and it's like, oh, well, my mom thinks this about these ideas, and she says it's fine to wear tank tops, and right,
Hmm.
each of those little things just evolves that brain differently
Yeah.
because now instead of one authority that is the only authority in your life, you're seeing two different authorities,
Hmm.
and you're having to learn and feel where do I feel better, what
Yeah.
fits me. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of the things I love the most that I don't think many people talk about. One of the things we mentioned was the one secure adult theory that I'm
Mm.
always bringing up, and that you getting out of the marriage and both of us getting out of the marriage, we were able to become more secure in ourselves. And that
Hmm.
leads to stronger individual parent child bonds.
Yes. I think for sure, I mean, other than the one child who wants no contact, and because I made peace with that, I've been able to tell my other adult children, like, if there's a time where you feel like you want no contact from me, I will respect that if that's part of your path. But I'm at a place where we can talk about that. Like, and they come to me. My children will come to me for
Yeah.
support, for advice, and I'm able to tell them, I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah. Versus when they came to you support and advice when you were married,
It was
it
very
was a bit of a
different.
shit show.
Yeah. It was like, you need to pray about it. You need to get a blessing from your dad. You need to, if you don't want to talk to your dad, then you need to go to this other man or to this other man or to this other man. Like, not
Yes.
yourself. Don't trust yourself.
Yeah.
But you need to outsource that to one of these religious figures. And now I can say, you can trust yourself.
Yeah, which all that was doing, just so you all realize, all that was doing was training your children to ultimately put their trust in external authorities.
Hmm.
And when you make a decision to, like, for us to get divorced, to believe in ourselves, like, I'm going to trust myself first,
Yeah.
that is the new blueprint that my children see in me,
Yeah.
that they are getting to every day see evolving and unfolding. Oh, this is what a life lived by someone who's going to trust themselves first
Hmm.
looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm, so yummy. We talked about that ultimately there's these changes in malleability, which would be
Hmm.
getting more exposure to diverse family structures,
Hmm.
and even potentially, learning to have new relationships with someone
Hmm.
like a stepdad or step siblings.
Yeah. Yeah. So my children, it's challenging with their stepmom. She has brain damage. She had a fall that put her in a coma for 18 months in her early adulthood. So we know that she has some challenges, um, especially with her anger. And so they've learned how
Yep.
to live around that. But she also has three lovely children. And the children, my children, her children, they love each other. And it has expanded them, given them more love. And I know that's not true for everyone. I feel like we lucked out. But it has been, and my, well, and their stepmother's extended family has been great to my kids as well. And so there
Mm-hmm.
is that additional expansiveness that can be available, and in my case is available.
Yeah, and in my instance, right, it's not so much having other children around in a stepchildren kind of situation, but getting to see, getting to have the connections and the conversations with my partner Joe,
Yes.
and this completely different example of what it means to be a man who's way
Mm-hmm.
more balanced in his feminine and his masculine,
Yeah.
who, in the words of Bo, is just, when we broke up, he was like, he was so nice and kind and calm.
Okay, okay. So I got to say, your listeners may not know that you broke up. So they're back together again.
Yeah, so so all of you, I dropped an episode on Friday where I
Oh, okay.
did,
Okay.
yes, I ran through the whole, I'm so excited. I didn't tell you that I dropped because I always drop on Tuesdays. So
Yes.
you will not know, Quinn. There is a secret episode that dropped on Friday because I
Ah,
wanted it to be before this one, detailing
okay.
extensively what that was like. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And how shocking it was going through that to see how much my boys, how much they already love having him around. How
Yes.
he is just this grounding, stabilizing presence in our family. And they are getting to see a
Mm-hmm.
romantic relationship unlike anything they've seen before. Like last night, it was so cute. We got home after being all out to dinner. Joe and I are in my bedroom. The kids are like making crepes or something. And they were calling me from the kitchen, and I was kissing Joe in my bedroom. And I was like, coming, and I kiss him a little bit more. And we're making plans for later tonight. I'm like, I want you. And so I come out into the living room, and as I'm walking in, Bo's like, I could hear you kissing. I know you guys were kissing in there. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you do when you love someone. Like,
Mm, yeah.
they're just seeing a whole different level of physical connection, emotional connection, intimacy, like genuine
Mm-hmm.
partnership,
Yes.
and getting to interact with a male figure, you know, in different ways than they would with their dad or their grandfather, right? It's just another person that gets to love them and be a part of their constellation of adults that are here to support them.
Yes. But if we back up a
Yeah.
few months when you were thinking you wanted him around your kid, it was kind of like this whole conversation, but in that microcosm of how is this going to affect my kids? I'm worried about that. Are they going to feel abandoned? What is this going to be like? And it has been better than you could have imagined. But we didn't know
Such
that until you tried.
no, no. And you did such a beautiful job in coaching me, being like, we can try this. We can see how it goes. We can check in. And yeah, so incredible to see how having somebody, Joe lives with us now,
Hmm.
um, how it's just, I never dreamed, right, Quinn? We'll
Yeah.
have to do an episode about this in the future where we talk about just these shifts I've had around commitment and actually having somebody in your life that's supportive and adds to it. And a big key of that is that Joe does not try to parent my
Yeah.
boys. He has full and utter respect for what all of us have been doing for 5 years now, 4 years before he showed up.
Yeah.
And he did not have an ego that needed to be assuaged by coming in and being the big man. He's very, very just super respectful of everybody's dynamics in the family and has such a gentle, like, kind of just like happy to be here kind of feeling,
Hmm.
and also don't need to be in the limelight, which is great because, as we all know, I love the limelight. So I'm like, yep, that's okay. I got it, Joe. I got it. Put the spotlight right on me. Right on me.
I love that.
Yeah. So these were just a few of the benefits that we had talked about. We also mentioned independence and adaptability, right? They
Yeah.
learn to be self-reliant in ways that they weren't previously.
Yeah.
And
Which is
even,
different than being parentified. We're not making them the
yes,
parent. They don't have to raise themselves or siblings.
and us.
But like telling your 8-year-old, I'm going to let you get your own water, or I'm going to go out tonight. You guys do your own thing. Like there's some beautiful ways
Yes.
of letting them explore and be more independent. And having opinions, I think, is a really beautiful way for them to exhibit that independence.
Yes, for sure. My boys, I mean, they do dishes, they do all their own laundry. Those are things I think if I'd stayed married, I just wouldn't have even questioned.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I got things to do. I got a business to run. I'm
Yeah.
a dad. So
Yeah.
on that note, Quinn, oh my goodness. Thank you for another beautiful episode.
Thank you, Britta.
Um, I just have to say, Quinn has been dropping some really amazing episodes. She's been kind of talking to me about them through our messaging back and forth on Voxer. What was one of the ones you just dropped?
Oh, we just talked about marital rape.
Exactly. I was hoping this one had dropped because
Yeah.
you are just talking on these really deep, gorgeous, like hard hitting topics that one of the things I love most about Quinn is just you have a total your brain works very differently and the way
Hmm.
you podcast is just
Thank you.
I just feel like yeah, there's so many really deep, beautiful points when you drop your episodes. So I wanted to encourage everybody because I'm like, it's such a gift to have both of these resources.
Yes, I agree. I can't count the number of times that I've said, "Hey, go listen to Britta talk about CPTSD." Like all of these things, they serve us on each side. They serve us whether we stay married or not, or go on to other relationships. We've
Yes.
been talking about things for years between us that we're trying to pour out into the greater consciousness to help all of us thrive, no matter what choices we make.
Yes. I love that. And this marital rape one is especially important for those,
Yeah.
you know, that's something when she told me she was going to drop it, I was like, oh my God, I have to make sure my women know because that is stuff I want them to be listening to and understanding. It's really important. And I guess my final piece is just to say, so super exciting. Um,
Hmm.
on Tuesday, with this smaller group of women, these kind of founding members that I've compiled, we're going to be opening up the community. And for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be testing it out with them. And Quinn is one of those founding
Mm.
members.
Whoop, whoop. I'm
I know.
excited.
I am too. I just, this weekend was like, it's been a lot. I've felt like my own childhood fears of like running a group or through my coaching, I've only
Yeah,
done one-on-one and the podcast may feel like I'm used to, but this still feels very intimate,
it
because it's just,
does. It does, which is so beautiful because like you said, you haven't done this before. It's either been high-end one-on-one coaching
mm-hmm.
and more intensive, or podcast, which may feel too generalized for the help that some women need, but a community where they get access to your glitter and your magic and your wisdom, as well as the wisdom of the curated information, the curated members, for a fraction of the price of what it would take to get access to you one on one.
Yeah.
I really hope that women will just come in and bask in this healing place that you've created. I'm very excited for it. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I am too. And I think what I'm most excited about this weekend was as I was getting these emails back in from the women that are going to be in this trial run,
Hmm.
was what you said of like the curated membership.
Hmm.
Because I was having this moment instead of feeling the fear of like, oh, I'm going to be facilitating. I stopped and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be in a room filled with like,
Hmm.
some of my dearest friends, some of my oldest,
Hmm.
dearest friends, like you, previous clients that I've had. I have a
Hmm.
few women that have actually already gone through the process, but still want to be here to like help and contribute their wisdom to the
Yes.
community. And then these women that I've met on 90-minute intensives that I've
Hmm.
fallen in love with. And I'm like, oh my God, they're all about to like hang out with each other. It's like, hold
Yep.
on to your horses. We may open a portal to another reality because that's going to
Yes.
be a fuck ton of really powerful witchy magic all in this space. So,
Yes.
so excited to do that. So grateful you're going to be in there with me.
Hmm.
And, through those 2 weeks, of course, that'll be leading towards us eventually opening up the community to the greater group, to all of you on the podcast that maybe haven't met me individually. That'll be where you get to kind of drop in and start doing this deeper work in a community setting, which will be just utter magic. I've seen the power of coaching one on one, but what I keep seeing and learning more about is that community is like five
Yeah.
times that.
Yes. As I think about both of our past selves and what we could have used in making that decision to stay or go, to have a
Mm-hmm.
place where we are heard, we are held, and we are validated, and we're not pushed either way,
Nope.
that just being there in this place where the acknowledgement of the wrestling that's going on within our souls is acknowledged. And then the tools to get clear, to make some clear headed decisions.
Next steps.
Yes, to
Yes, just
explore
tiny next
staying or
steps.
going. Like either way, having a community and having that love there, oh, that would have been such a soft place to land. And now you're
And to
doing it for
carry
others.
with you, right? That's the
Yes.
other thing I love is I don't want
Yes.
these relationships to just be, during this period. I see these as being long term.
Mm-hmm.
One of my clients who's actually going to be in there, we're going to be recording an episode that's going to end up just being in the community. It's going to be like a
Mm-hmm.
deep dive into her journey. I coached with her a while ago, probably around 3 years ago. One
Mm-hmm.
of the things she said that was the hardest is after we finished coaching together, she's like, when coaching ended, I missed you so much and I
Yeah.
didn't have a support system and it made it really hard. It still took her a couple years after that to
Mm-hmm.
leave. And I said, what did you need most? And she's like, I needed other women around me telling
Yes.
me, I get you. I see you. And even now, she's like, even now, my friends still don't get it. They're all
Yeah.
married.
Yeah.
And so to have women the rest of your life, to have a space with women who are like, oh, I get it. Like,
Yeah.
who are like,
Yeah.
oh, you got divorced. That's so sad. Right. That are just like, girl, tell me all about it. Whichever way you are, like, I'm here for it.
Yes. Congratulations. And I'm so sorry. Which one?
Yeah. Which one? You tell me which one, and I got your back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it'll be a lot of beautiful magic. So all of you listening, send us your beautiful vibes these 2 weeks while we're
Mm-hmm.
working out some of the kinks. We've already worked out a few kinks. Sent out
We
an
love
email with
kinks.
I know that wouldn't reply, so people are having to find me through other ways. I was like, this is why I do small group launches.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, to just work out a lot of those things ahead of time, and then
Yeah.
once we're ready, we'll bring it to
Yeah.
the greater community. So
Yeah.
thank you for your time, Quinn.
Oh,
Oof.
thank you,
This
Britta.
was a yummy, delicious, long episode,
This
y'all.
This was.
Holy shit. It's like we haven't recorded in a long time and we just needed some time together.
Yes, we did. Thank you.
Love you, my dear.
And love you too. Bye bye.